Major funding for the Great American Quilt is provided by Lehman Publishing, publisher of Quilter's Newsletter Magazine, the magazine for quilt lovers. By Fairfield Processing Corporation, maker of Polyfill brand products for crafting. By RJR Fashion Fabrics, where innovation is a tradition. By New Home, changing the way America sews. By Keepsake Quilting, publishers of the Keepsake Quilting Catalog, the Quilter's Wish Book. And by American School of Needlework Incorporated, publisher of books in all areas of needlework.
Hi, I'm glad you're back. I've got lots to show you. Now, I know I've got a crazy quilt, and some of you know that I am kind of crazy about these quilts, but don't worry, we're not going to talk for half an hour about a crazy quilt. We'll talk just a little bit, though. These are what Laura and Diana will be showing you. We're talking myths and mystery, and part of the mystery they have is how they can turn rectangles like this into triangles. They've got kind of a neat trick for you later. And what else? Oh yes, we've got Sonya Barrington, who's going to be showing you how to do marbleizing, which is going to be a real mystery to me, how she can do it. And then I brought just kind of odds and ends. I wanted to talk to you about some of the common myths that have grown up about quilts, such as, is the crazy quilt the first type of quilt made? And you can see I can't keep my hands off this. This is wonderful. It feels so good because it's silks and satins. The answer is no, it isn't the first type of quilt that was made. You hear stories about crazy quilts being invented by women in insane asylums, and that is not true. So if anyone says that, you can tell them that you heard it here. It really isn't true. These were fancy quilts that were made in the 1880s, and believe it or not, this cat probably has nothing to do with the maker. It doesn't mean that she had a pet cat. It means that she got one of the patterns that was available at that time. There were patterns that women could use for embroidery. I want you to look down here because I found in a magazine this exact pattern. This quilt is owned by a friend of mine, and I was really interested to be paging through a magazine and find that exact pattern. So that's one of the things that interests me about crazy quilts. What else did I have to show? Oh, okay. This is kind of the case of the disappearing color. You know, when you see a quilt and you say to yourself, why on earth did the quilt maker make it in those colors? Well, sometimes they didn't make it in those colors. The colors faded. The story behind this quilt, and this is owned by Kathleen McCready, it's her family quilt. She's from Austin, Texas, is that the fabric was purchased at two different times from Montgomery Ward, both before the war, and technology changed after the war. She said during the war they were busy making uniforms, and so the quilt maker had a little bit of time span in between, and the newer fabric didn't fade, but the old fabric did. So sometimes you'll find a quilt that has beautiful red flowers and tan leaves, and you think, why tan leaves? They weren't tan, they were green, they've just faded. Oh, I've got this book that I found. This is owned by Willeen Smith. I never knew this, and I thought this was really interesting, that as early as 1895, there were patterns. You can see this is a pattern book for quilts, and it's all full of, this one has about 400 different designs. Well, what's interesting is not just that you could buy patterns for quilts, but by about 1900, you could buy the whole quilt block already made up in silk or cotton, whatever you wanted. So it kind of makes you wonder sometimes if some of those family quilts that we've been admiring might have been really factory-made quilts by women working with sewing machines in factories. There were lots and lots of kits. I found this from a friend, and I just wanted to bring it in. So this is just some of what we're going to be showing you, and Diane and Laura are going to show you how to make these.
Got the goose completed.
Oh, Diana, that's beautiful. We almost have a bit of magic to share with you today. We're going to show you how to take squares and rectangles and make them into triangles in a method that we call the double half square triangle technique.
And we will take that method and make blocks. We're going to make the Wild Goose Chase variation and the Sawtooth Star.
Right, and then we have several quilts that use these two blocks to share with you in different settings and color schemes. We've got a full lesson planned.
We sure do. But first, let's get started. If you can get your pencil and paper handy, I will give you some cutting measurements. First, we will cut the background for the goose, 2.5 inch strips. Then we will take those strips and cut 2.5 inch squares. Then we will cut our goose fabric, and we will cut this 4.5 inches by 2.5 inches. And we have a rectangle and a square. Let me show you how we do this. We place a crease line because we want to be able to sew from corner to corner. You might want to use a pencil line to keep you accurate and straight. We will then stitch this line, and you can see the stitched line here. Then we are going to press, let me just show you these layers underneath here. Then we're going to press up with our iron to form the triangle.
You may remember this technique on the roof line of the Madison House.
Yes. And give that a nice sharp press. Now I want to take and cut a seam allowance about 1/4 inch. Just whack that off, and I've got a piece of triangle that I'm going to make another quilt out of.
You keep promising me that, Diana.
Then I'm going to press this back, and then I will add the other, here I've got one other triangle, and I'm going to stitch right over the triangle I got through sewing. And you can see the finished, and I will cut this apart, and then now you can see the finished triangle here. Let's put these together so I can show you how to line up the triangles here. Okay, fold this. We got these flying in the right direction. Let's just turn these around so I can show you how to get this on here. Can you see this line here where the two stitching lines come together? I want you to stitch right across here, but I want you to stay just a hair in from that stitched line. That keeps the geese points. And let's look down here at the finished block where they're together. Now we do need to cut, though, our two side pieces here. And if you will cut 1.5 by 6.5 strips, then you can just apply those strips right onto your sewn geese. And now we have a Wild Goose Chase variation, and you can see over here how the different blocks are going together, flying in different directions.
Oh, that's great. Take a look at the Sawtooth Star. This is another block that works real well with this technique. I've broken the block down into all of the individual shapes that are required for it. You can see that there are 4 double half square triangle units. Now for this 6-inch block, you will need to cut 4 2-inch by 3.5 inch pieces of this background fabric for the large triangles, and then all of the star points and as well as the background corners are all cut 2 inches. And then finally this center square is cut 3.5 inches. I just want to tell you quickly that this was the block that inspired the technique. I was teaching the Sawtooth Star to a student, and she was using a light fabric like I have here and said, I said, well, you can just simply join 2 half-square triangles together, which would result in a seam up the middle, and she didn't like that because, of course, the light fabric. So we put our heads together, and I'm just crazy about it. It works real well.
That was such an inventive part.
Now, we've got this arranged. If I'm making several different blocks, 10 or 15 of them, I'm going to just stack them up as many high as I need, and then I can quickly place these so you can see one right sides together and stitch right through here, remembering to stitch just to the outside of that the stitching points. And again, the same thing happens on the other side, right on through. And I want you to take a look here at how it looks after it's been sewn. And can you see those little chain of stitches? Don't cut those apart. That's going to keep everything intact for you. And also it's real helpful at this next point where we're going to press. Take a look at how these seams are facing outwards. That's the direction they want to go. So let them go that way. Give them a good firm press, both of these 2 outer rows, and then the inside row, press the seams in the direction of the center of the block. And now look, this is great. You can just simply flip it over. The 2 rows go together beautifully because you've kept them joined. Run your stitching line again, keeping to the outside, and the same thing on the other side to complete your 6-inch Sawtooth Star. Take a look at these.
I love the centers on those.
Aren't they great?
stars.
They're just great. Look at this one with the little bear. They're just wonderful. These are 4-inch stars, and I've seen them done 3-inch, 2-inch. What's nice is that you can make these very small because you don't have to cut tiny little triangles. You just simply have to cut squares and rectangles. Let's take a look at some other quilts that have used these small stars.
I love this quilt.
Ah,
It's familiar, though.
it is familiar,
I
Katie.
think it's one of her early ones.
I think it was one of Katie Prindle's earlier quilts. It's one. Once we started working with the technique, I called Katie and I said, I've got this idea I want you to try out for me. And so she pulled her little scrap bag out and started making stars and more stars. And
And she worked all night, finished up the stars, and the next morning she called and said, oh, I need some background fabric to set the stars because I want to do an alternate block in between, and
oh,
she got it together.
It's just great. Let's take a look at Alex Anderson's.
100 Stars in the Night.
Beautiful.
It is. It has lots and lots and lots of colors. In fact, the full spectrum of colors working here. I really like the cool colors working in with the warm colors for the border here. And this is just a stripping technique, and we've done this before here, and just strip all the colors together and cut them up and put them in your border.
That's great. And the sashing strip that she's used to separate the stars just gives it a little feeling of some space.
Right. Oh, this one, Laura.
Oh, isn't this fun? Do you remember this one, Diana?
I do.
This is the Wild Goose Chase set together just in a random pattern.
And let's take a look at the quilting line here. The diagonal quilting line in the background area here echoes the geometric of the goose.
And the border. Let's not forget this gorgeous border.
I like a flower border when you have all these geometric and sharp angles going together.
Favorite. A couple different fabrics were used on the sashing pieces too. I think that gives it some added interest. Oh, it's great. Oh, let me not forget. One more.
Yes, this is one of my favorite quilts. It's done by Dina Canty. This big one out here.
Boy.
Oh, it's so nice to have a special fabric that you like and being able to work your patchwork right in with it. Notice this peacock here. She's chosen the colors exactly in the geese from it and worked it all together. A great quilt, Dina.
It's also, this technique allows you to keep these rows nice and straight when you're joining your units together.
Important to have straight vertical rows if you're going to have geese flying.
That's right. We've just touched on 2 of the many blocks that are possible with this technique, and we hope you'll just have a lot of fun with it.
Laura and Diana have shown you some different blocks with that half square triangle method, but look at this. This is a wonderful quilt by Rumi O'Brien, and look at these little critters. What she's done with the idea of triangles is to make kind of a patchwork mountain land.
The story of this quilt unfolds as the main character waves goodbye as he starts out on his journey, carrying an empty basket on his back. Rabbits sit in the meadow, fish swim in waters, and a friendly fox runs quickly past a rock. He comes to a prairie and cuts some grass to fill the basket. Then he goes over a bridge where treacherous water runs below. He runs up a hill where a panorama opens up to distant hills and valleys. Reaching a peak, he waves to flower clouds. Now there is an opening where he sees a pear tree very full of golden pears. He eats a pear, and the path continues among wild flowers. Again he comes across another bridge with views of a tilled hillside below. Suddenly, he comes upon a meadow full of mushrooms. After he descends a steep path, exhausted, he lies down in the grass. He sees a full moon rising above the mountains. Meanwhile, nearby creek cascades down the rocks and meanders off as he listens. The water eventually falls into a lake near a willow tree. He takes a boat out to fish. As he continues his trip, heavy clouds gather and he encounters a downpour, but soon a rainbow appears. He returns to his path. After meeting mountain goats and walking on a wooded path, he comes to a mountain lake. Taking the basket off his back, he dives in for a swim, as two rabbits play nearby. He is nearly home, so he picks a flower for his wife and runs down the steep hill toward home, passing a neatly furrowed vegetable patch along the way. Something is cooking in the kitchen. Smoke rises from the chimney.
I love her idea of using the quilt to tell a story. She was telling me about the fabric in this, which is very beautiful. Rumi's Japanese, and she told me what these came from, and you will never guess they were diapers. I said, diapers? Then she told me the story that it's very soft fabric. It was her parents' summer kimonos, and in Japan it's the custom to make diapers out of this very soft material. So she took it from her sister's pile of diapers for her baby son, and it's a great recycling idea. It's gorgeous. And look at this quilting. I wanted to talk to Rod about this quilt, which is unquilted, and get his idea of what he thinks of quilting an unquilted top. Brad, I don't think you've seen this one. This is a top I got a while ago.
Oh, it's an Ohio Star. Oh, it's wonderful.
Okay, now this is just a top.
I love tops.
I like plain tops, but I know a lot of our viewers have tops, and a lot of people think you've got to quilt them. So I wanted to see what you thought about them.
Well,
look at this in the back.
yeah, that's one of the reasons I like them so much, is just because you can see the back of them. You can see how she worked.
See what's going on back there.
Yeah, and see the construction. I mean, here's actually a label from the fabric manufacturer.
So what do you recommend? Quilting, not quilting?
Well, as a general rule, I mean, personally, I like things as I found them. I like the way they are. It depends. If somebody found what I would consider a masterpiece quilt top that was really rare and unusual, I would never recommend changing it.
You
I
just
would leave it
right
as it is.
Unquilted.
Yes. Quilt tops that people have in their family or that they have found, fine. If they want to go ahead and do it themselves or have somebody quilt it, what I do advise people is to put a label on the back saying this was an old top and approximately the date, and then who quilted it and when, so you have that record, that documentation.
Sounds like a good idea. Because what you've got then is kind of a hybrid old and new quilt, but if you've got a label, everyone will always know that.
Right. Now, some quilt makers have told me that some quilt tops were not quilted because they weren't pieced right, and it would be hard to quilt them.
They'd be too lumpy or something?
They'd be too lumpy. They wouldn't.
Oh.
They wouldn't quilt and be flat.
I've never heard that. That's kind of interesting. It makes sense now that you think about it. We've been talking myths and mysteries today, and one mystery that I have always wanted solved is how people get paint when they're marbling without using a brush. So we've got Sonya Barrington here who's been doing it for years, and I want to see how she can do it in the small amount of time we've got. Well, hi.
Hi, Penny.
There you are in a marbleized blouse.
Yeah.
I suppose you don't just dip that in, did you?
No, I didn't. I did yardage.
You did yardage and you made your blouse. It is nice.
No, I did the yardage in a bigger tub than we're working with today.
Okay, and you've got a quilt here. I wanted to take a look at this because you've done small pieces like you're going to show us.
That's right.
Perfect for
Perfect for
blocks.
patchwork or for applique. And I want to point out that each time that you do a marbling, it's like a monoprint.
So each time you dip a fabric, then you start with new paint?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And each time it can be different. And each marbler does it differently.
Well, we're going to see how you do it. This is so gorgeous.
What I'm using here in the tray is something called carrageenan, and that is a food additive. It's made from seaweed, and it's real thick and gooey.
It looks like egg white or something. Where do you
Feels
get
like
it?
You can get it at craft supply stores or dye houses. There are a few kits on the market.
It looks like the paint, you're putting paint in here that is what kind?
This is an acrylic. This is a water base, and I thin it down with water, and you can get this at any art supply stores. There are many, many, many brands on the market, so any of the water-based paints.
Okay, what is this special gizmo you've got here that you're, this?
My little whisk. This is just a bunch of broom stalks, and it's taped together. It's used.
You went out and attacked your broom?
Yeah, I go and cut the brooms up and use this for my marbling.
You've got some eyedroppers too there. Do you use eyedroppers sometimes?
Yeah, you can use the eyedroppers also.
Any way of just getting little pieces of paint in
Any
there?
way of getting...
Okay, this is what I'm a little nervous about. These look kind of like tools of torture. What are these things?
These are called the combs, and you can make them in different sizes. Actually, you can buy these from a book bindery, but I made
those?
these.
Okay. You've got taped together pieces of wood and it looks like big pins.
Uh-huh.
Oh, look at that. Oh, that's a gorgeous one.
This is the fun part.
That is how they get those little peacocky kind of effects?
That's right. That's called combing. And this other kind of tool, which is also a comb, makes another kind of pattern.
Oh, you can really see it coming.
That's right.
And
you can also use a stylus, which is a kind of a stick. Now, the only trick to marbling, the only thing that can go wrong, I think, is the fabric, the way you lay it down onto the tray, and you want to be very careful. Don't just throw it at the tray.
Because you're trying to get it in nice and flat.
That's
so the color.
right. You don't have to leave it in here for very long.
Oh, that's gorgeous.
Isn't that nice?
It's really that easy?
That's so
That's it.
That's
Okay.
all there is to it.
Now, it's still got that goo on it. Do you leave that on?
You can leave that on for about 15 minutes, then you can rinse your fabrics, and after 5 to 7 days, you can wash them if you need to. It needs a few days to cure.
So that's what I wondered. And obviously you've got a blouse on, so I'm sure you wash your blouse.
Yeah.
But it is totally washable.
It is washable. I do recommend hand washing. I wouldn't throw this in the in
You
the
don't have to
machine
heat
with
set
bleach.
it with an iron or anything?
There's no heat setting.
Oh, you make it sound so easy.
It is easy.
I can't believe it.
Yeah.
So what about doing larger yardages?
You can do larger yardage like I did for my blouse by making yourself a larger tray.
Larger tray?
You can take 4 2x4s and then toenail them together on the corners.
Toenail them,
Toenail them together.
Yeah, I like that letter.
Put a piece of plastic over it.
You're
and
a pretty
have
handy
it.
gal, aren't you?
Yeah, you have to improvise.
Okay, one thing I wanted to know, did I ask you if you had to pre-treat that fabric.
Oh, you didn't, but yes, you do. The fabric has to be pre-treated with an alum solution.
You just soak it and let it dry?
You soak it in alum, then drip it dry,
Okay.
and you're ready to go. Unfortunately, it's not one of those things that you can decide to do on a whim. You do have to prepare.
Well, you have to prepare most things. You were very prepared.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Before we say goodbye, we've said goodbye to Sonya, but before we say goodbye, I wanted to show you the work of an English artist because we're talking about some mysterious things, and I think she's done kind of a mysterious quilt. Her name is Pauline Burbidge, and she's from Nottingham, England. Now, you may be wondering why we're showing the work of an English artist, but we've kind of adopted Pauline over here. She's shown her quilts with American artists for so many years that we almost think of her as an American quilt maker. Pauline here has created room-like quilts with canopies and deep spaces, with floors that turn into ceilings, curtains that billow out to reveal dark windows. When you were a child, did you ever lay down on the floor and stare up at the ceiling and wonder what it would be like to live in an upside-down world? To walk on the ceiling? To have to step over door openings and have lights in the center of each floor? Well, Pauline's quilts, which were commissioned to hang in a steep stairwell, have this effect on me. You can almost get vertigo looking at their meandering stripes. Doesn't Pauline have a gorgeous way of dealing with stripes? I love those quilts. I'm going to love next week too because it's going to be like 4th of July around here. We've got flags. Diane and Laura are going to be showing you